Hello everyone, I'm Marine Lefort and you're listening to Les Voix de la Photo, the podcast that gives a voice to the professionals behind photography and visual culture. For the past 5 years, I have had the chance to speak with those who shape the field, from curators, editors to agents and institution leaders, diving into their journeys, insights and perspectives on photography today. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome Diane Smyth. Hello, Diane.
Hello, thanks for having me.
And thank you so much for joining me today. You live in London, but you're currently in France and Paris for a short trip. So I feel very lucky that you found the time to meet with me for this interview. You are the editor at the British Journal of Photography and Photoworks, and you've written for The Guardian, FT Weekend magazine, Aperture, FOAM, Apollo, as well as many exhibition catalogues and monographs. You also teach the history and theory at the theory of photography at the London College of Communication, and you have created exhibitions for institutions such as the Photographers Gallery and the Lianzhou Foto Festival. In this conversation, I would like to explore your career path, your editorial approach, and your reflections on the evolution of photography today. Big program. So let's start from the beginning. Did you have an early relationship with images or photography growing up? What kind of visual or cultural influence shaped your interest in the medium?
Sure. Well, the background I grew up in, we didn't go to galleries at all, and I didn't know people who were artists or curators. So my first encounters with photography were really through newspapers and magazines. As I was growing up, we got the Guardian newspaper delivered to the home, so I used to read that every morning. And then also, I feel I was quite lucky because I was in the UK in the 1990s, was when I was a teenager and a young woman. And this was like a really vibrant, exciting time in the UK. And there were lots of...
Why?
There were lots of like style magazines. So for example, the one that I really liked was The Face magazine. Which really made like culture feel like something very alive that was very accessible to everyone. So yeah, when I was about 14, I covered all of the walls of my bedroom, like completely covered in photographs that I ripped out from The Face magazine. So yeah, I was definitely interested in photography earlier on, but it was definitely, I grew up in small towns. So that was the way that I could access art and culture.
Where did you grow up?
So I was born in Northern Ireland, and when I was 5, we moved to the countryside in Kent, which is south of London. And when I was 12, we moved again to Buckinghamshire, which is north of London. And then when I was 18, I went to university, and yeah.
And when you put all the photographs on your wall, did you know you wanted to be working with photography? But
No, I didn't really think of that as a job. Like it wasn't really within my realm. But I was always a massive reader, so I guess I was always interested in like doing something with books or magazines or writing generally.
And so I read you study English literature and later modern literature. So I was thinking how did that academic background influence the way you approach photography?
Yeah, definitely. I went to study English at Birmingham University, which again, I feel really lucky that I went there because they had a cultural studies department, which was set up by Stuart Hall, who is this big Marxist theorist who really started cultural studies. So I wasn't in that department because I was studying English, but its effects definitely were rippling through the university. And also because I was studying English language as well as English literature. So it was quite kind of sociological way of looking at culture and language and culture generally, I suppose.
And did you remember why did you study literature? And because maybe when we are young, sometimes we have intuition, or we want to be we want to be like someone else. Or do you remember?
I just really, really loved reading from a really early age. I was a massive reader, and I'm still a big reader now. So it was just always going to be what I wanted to do. I did have a brief moment where I thought about studying sociology, because I did sociology A-level when I was 16 to 18. And my father, he was from Northern Ireland, so he didn't go to university, he didn't have a degree. So he was really panicked at the idea that I would study sociology, not English, because to him, English is a much more solid degree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why do you think so? Maybe he at this time he saw more jobs opportunities.
Yeah, it's
or?
like an English degree is a solid degree. You're definitely going to be able to get a job at the end of it. Whereas he was a bit scared about studying sociology. Yeah.
So at the end of your study, do you know where or what do you want to? What did you want you to do?
This is a funny story, actually, because so when I was at university, I didn't work on the student newspaper. But just through sheer luck, I bumped into a guy who was running a magazine in Birmingham. And so the summer after university, I had already arranged to stay in the city and teach English to Italian school children. So this guy was like, why don't you come and work on my magazine in the summer? So that's what I did. I taught English to the kids in the morning, and then I worked on the magazine in the afternoon, and then in the evenings I had to plan the lessons for the next day.
And what did you do at this this magazine?
It was like a kind of listings culture magazine. So I did listings, I wrote a few articles. It was, it was unpaid internship basically, but I didn't really know about things like unpaid internships. I just was like, oh, wow, amazing. I kind of reached the end of my degree. I was like, I have to get a job actually. So it just seemed like an amazing opportunity. And then I was already planning to go and live in another country and teach English. Because I studied English language, so I could just do that. I had this amazing revelation that I was very lucky to speak English. So I had a skill that could take me to other places. But I chose a really big school in Athens because they had a publishing department. So then I could get more publishing experience that way too.
Yeah, so you knew you wanted to be more close to the publishing industry? At this time?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I was kind of like, well, what shall I do? It's going to be something to do with writing. So, yeah.
So how was your experience at Athens?
Oh, it was great. It was really interesting time to be there. Now my partner is Greek just by coincidence. So we go back often. And the city has changed a lot. So again, I was there just before a lot of changes in Greece. Yeah, it was great. It was also really interesting, actually, because, because Greece had a military dictatorship which was supported by America. So the leftist people in Greece are really, really leftist. So it took me a while to find those people. But when I did, they had some really different ways of interpreting the world than I had seen previously in the UK. Like, say, for example, I think the UK is much more involved with America than Greece is. So that was really, really interesting.
So how long did you stay in Greece?
Just 1 year.
And after you went back to the UK?
Yeah, so I came back to the UK and I just asked everyone I knew if they knew anyone that would take me to do some publishing something. And like a friend of a friend's dad made books that he sold to other people. So I worked there for 2 weeks and I answered an advert in The Guardian for 2 weeks working at Bloomsbury Publishing, who are the people who publish Harry Potter. And it was just when the first Harry Potter came out.
Wow.
Yeah. But I was working for free. So I worked for free for 2 months and my dad was horrified because, I got a good degree and he was, why are you working for these people for no money? So anyway, quite quickly then, I suppose it's also to do with the particular era because it was when the internet was first really booming. So Oh, actually, sorry, before that, my first job was as an editorial secretary, and it was at this really old publisher, Marshall Cavendish, who were translating a lot of their old magazines into various Eastern European languages, because various Eastern European countries were joining the EU. So there I basically kind of made the tea, but it gave me the opportunity to see how a team works. And also it was paid, so that was good. And then I got a job on a website which was for new businesses. And because it was the internet era, like a lot of these new businesses were also web related. And it was quite old school. Like now, if I upload a story to a website, you know, a lot of it is kind of automated, but we had to do more coding and stuff behind the scenes at that stage. So yeah, I did those two jobs. What was my next job after that? Oh, my next job after that, I got a job on a financial magazine, which was, you know, not really my interest, but I was like, okay, you know, my first mission is to actually get a job in publishing. And then the editor left, so I became the editor quite quickly. Yeah. And then, yeah, it wasn't, you know, where my interest lies. Although still, I think it's interesting always to think about where the money comes from, because so much power is bound up in where the money comes from. But yeah, because I kind of wanted to be more involved with culture, that's when I did an MA. And there's a really great college in London, Birkbeck College, which is part of University of London. And it was set up for working people. So you do your studies in the evening and you write your essays at the weekends. And so I did an MA over 2 years there. And then
What was the subject of the MA?
That was modern literatures in English. So 20th century. I guess when I was doing my BA, I got really interested in like postmodern theorists like Baudrillard and Barthes and all of these people. So I wanted to go back and look at them more. So I concentrated quite a lot on theory on my course. And yeah, weirdly, the day I got my results for my MA, I got the job at the British Journal of Photography as well, because it happened to be in the same publisher that published the financial magazine. So I managed to like move across at that point.
And what was your first role, your first experience at the British Journal of Photography?
Oh, God, I think I was maybe features editor. At this point, the British Journal of Photography was really different, as this is like 2003, 2004. And it was a weekly magazine, and it was in English, we used to have things called trade magazines. So these were very much aimed at professionals. And it would give them useful advice, hopefully, on their professions. So we would have, you know, camera reviews, and we would have like, what's the best insurance that you can get to cover your job. And also, you know, nice interviews with photographers and that kind of thing. I suppose it might have been more involved with press photography as well at that point. Yeah. But BJP went on a trajectory basically in the years that followed, as photography became more accepted in art galleries in the UK. So BJP kind of followed that trajectory. And we, after a while, after quite a few years actually, we stopped doing the camera reviews and things. But I think, sorry, I'm rambling on a bit here. I think the technology is something really interesting though, because the technology partly governs what you can do. So yeah, I'm quite keen, not necessarily to do camera reviews, but to think about technology and how that governs how we see the world.
And can you explain for the people, I think there are not a lot, but who don't know the British Journal of Photography, can you just explain, what is the format and the history?
Yeah, sure. So it's the oldest photography magazine in the world. It was set up in 1854. So at that point, photography was a very new media. And it was kind of a newsletter for gentlemen, you know, what chemicals can we use to get images from this strange new device? When I joined, it was a weekly trade magazine, quite practical focus magazine. I should say that I was taken on by the editor, Simon Bainbridge, so I'm very grateful to him because he gave me my chance in photography. And then it was monthly for a while. And then, so I stayed a really long time. Obviously, we have a website as well. I left for a bit and freelanced. And then I rejoined in 2023. And then we decided to go quarterly. So now it's a much thicker magazine, but it comes out less often. But obviously, we have the internet to do stuff that's faster.
And you write also for other publications. So when did you start to write not just for the British Journal of Photography but for the other title?
I guess quite early on, actually, I started to write for other people. It's partly opportunities come your way, or maybe there's something that doesn't necessarily fit for BJP, or so yeah, I guess thinking about before 2013, because I had a year of maternity leave in 2013, and definitely then I wrote for the Philosophy of Photography, which is an academic journal, and I wrote for Foam and Aperture, and Creative Review. I got on quite well with the editor, who's still the editor now, so I used to write stuff for Creative Review. Yeah, I guess it's always interesting to have like other areas that you write for, especially as well, I suppose, because each magazine has kind of their field. So for example, now if I write for The Guardian, it's not writing for an audience that is knowledgeable about photography. So you have to write in a slightly different way, which can be interesting. And also, it obviously has millions of readers. So, if there's a big issue, which is something that is helpful to the world, it's really, really nice to be able to put it somewhere where it will get loads of eyes. But I also really enjoy in BJP the fact that I'm writing for a photo literate audience. So there's certain things you can assume, or you can choose artists whose work is quite focused on the medium as well.
And what does the role as editor at the British Journal of Photography involve? What is your role?
So I guess I choose the content basically for the print magazine. We have an online editor, Dalia Al-Jujaili, who's really brilliant. So I keep an eye on what she's doing online, but basically I can let her get on with it because she's great. So the print magazine, it's 4 times a year. It's quite thick. We give it themes, partly just because that helps us to think of what topics to cover. But also there's always some things that aren't thematic. So it might be, we have a section called Projects where we try to feature work by emerging artists. And we have a section called Intelligence at the back, where maybe it's quite similar to your podcast, actually. We try to talk to behind the scenes people. Partly maybe because I came from BJP as a weekly when it was very focused on useful insights for working photographers. So I feel that section still has that kind of feeling, hopefully.
And I was thinking, because you study literature and English, do you think literature analysis gives you a different lens on images?
Maybe. I mean, I guess like a lot of postmodern theory, because, my university was quite hardcore. We studied a lot of Lacan and Saussure and that kind of thing. So a lot of photographic theory, has its roots as well in those kind of perspectives. But also, I guess, so for example, on my MA for my dissertation, I wrote about telepathy in the books of John Wyndham, who is a science fiction writer in the UK, post-war. So, but it was looking at, telepathy, why was that concept invented at that time? So it's looking at the emergence of a mass society and also looking at new telecommunications. So these kind of fears and paranoias that people had about radio and that kind of thing. So I guess some of the themes feel quite similar to me between the two, although obviously photography is different as well and it's its own medium. Yeah.
And you are also editor at the Photoworks, and you have edited the Photoworks annuals in 2003 and 2004. So I think maybe you can explain what is Photoworks and the annuals and what is your role?
Yeah, so I left BJP and I spent like 4 or 5 years freelancing. And then eventually I started to work 2 days a week at Photoworks. So Photoworks is a really interesting organization. It's much younger than BJP, but it's the 30th anniversary this year. And it's a commissioning body, so they are able to give artists money to make new work, and it also supports artists with mentoring and curatorial practice and so on. They do a lot in kind of learning and education. So, with younger people or with minoritized groups, they go in and try to help people's access to photography. And they're also, they're a charity. And some of the money comes from the government, so they're partly state funded. So this seemed like a really interesting place to be because it's a slightly different area of photography to BJP, which is a private company. So I hadn't worked for like a state funded institution before, so I thought this would be interesting. And they have an online magazine, so I edited that. It's 4 times a year. I edited that for 2 years. But when I went back to BJP as editor after a while, it was just a bit too much. So I handed the website over to Amin Yousefi, who's also a photographer, and he's doing a great job with the website. However, I kept the annual because the annual is a really great project. It's once a year print publication. This year is very much focused on Photoworks because it's the 30th anniversary. So I've written a big history of the organization, which was very interesting to see the different players involved in creating this ongoing organization. The last 2 years, though, 2024 and 2023, basically, I had free reign, which is a really amazing position to be in. And I'm very grateful for the trust that they gave me, where I could just come up with a theme and then, gather contemporary artists whose work kind of explores that theme. So I looked at The Thing in 2023 and Multi in 2024. But both of them tried to consider photography as a medium, and what is the ideology that's embedded in the technology of photography? So it came from a few different places. There's a really amazing essay by Ariella Azoulay in a book called Capitalism and the Camera. And her opening sentence is, imagine if photography was invented not in the 19th century, but in 1492, something like that. So, the actual camera was, evolved and perfected in the 19th century. But what is the way of looking at the world that's embedded in the camera? And when did that evolve? Which I thought was a really, really interesting idea. Because there's, lots of work going on at the moment to think about the power relations of the camera and how can we empower the subject as well as the photographer and all of these questions. But to me, that kind of suggested that there's something about the camera and photographs themselves that we won't be able to overcome because they're intrinsic to the medium. And then I started looking at Aimé Césaire, the post-colonial writer. He was talking about how colonization is thingification. That's the direct translation into English of what he said, chosification. So then I went on this kind of whole journey thinking about the distancing effect of photography and how, we extract in frame and then put what we show behind a surface. So obviously I started looking at Walter Benjamin and even the Society of the Spectacle as well and Guy Debord and all of that. So The Thing was all about that. I'm kind of tried to gather artists whose work in some ways interrogates this intrinsic part of photography. So it might be that they paint onto the image or they do something with the framing and so on. And then the next year I was a bit I haven't quite finished with looking at the medium of photography. So I was looking at the idea of image reproduction, because I was interested that photography was first invented and it was single images. But then Fox Talbot in the UK, the centre of industrial capitalism where factories are pumping out multiple copies of things, it was there was this real impetus to be able to create duplicates of images. So again, it's looking at, what's the ideology embedded in that, especially at the moment, obviously in the digital era, images are more and more replicable and multiplied over and over.
Yeah, and sometimes we don't know. The first picture is we don't really know. What it is.
Yeah.
And how many people works at Photoworks?
Oh, there's quite a lot of us, but lots of us are not full time. There's trying to add up quickly in my head.
No, it's around 20 people or 50 or
it's sort of 15, 20, something like that. Yeah.
And you are also you also lecture at the London College of Communication. So
yes,
I think it can be interesting to have your point of view on what are the questions your students are asking today about photography.
Yeah,
and how do you see their approach differing from earlier generation?
Yeah, well, I guess I don't know so much about earlier generations of photography students, but I've been teaching there for like 3 years now, I think, doing the history and theories, which is great because I read a lot of photography theory. So it's really nice to have like a home where I'm with others who read it and discuss it. And it's always very interesting. What are the students thinking about? I guess the students are very interested in this idea of the power dynamic between the photographer and the subject. And they're very uncomfortable with the idea that they might be, sort of dominating and extracting from others, which is good. I think it's good those questions are being asked, like the ethical questions around photography. Sometimes I worry, though, that we don't want to only take pictures of ourselves. Like, I'm really interested in documentary photography and journalism as well. So, there are really big things going on in the world that I think it's important to look at and cover. So it might be that we have to find alternative ways of doing it, but it would be a shame to never engage with, these massive things that are happening around us. Another interesting thing I would say about LCC is that there are quite a lot of Chinese students there now, and much fewer EU students because Britain left the EU, obviously. So one of the things with the Chinese students, which I find absolutely amazing, is that while I'm talking, they have apps on their phones which translate what I'm saying into Mandarin as I'm speaking in real time. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, so maybe because they're not the same language, maybe they don't, comment dire, how we speak is how we see, so maybe there are some things different.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and their areas of knowledge may be slightly different. For example, that we do a seminar looking at image manipulation. So I show them, the really famous photo with Stalin with like the 3 generals, and then over time they get removed until it's just him on his own. So I showed the first image and I said, "So who's this?" pointing at Stalin. And the UK students don't know who Stalin is, but the Chinese students all knew. So that's interesting. Obviously they have a different education and different bodies of knowledge. And the work that the Chinese students make is really interesting. And often it has an interesting engagement with technology as well, I would say. Obviously there are some photographers that are very popular with students. So say, for example, Cindy Sherman is always quite popular with some of the younger female students because they're thinking about, female identity and feminism and all of that good stuff. The Chinese students, quite often Sugimoto comes up. So, they're looking at a whole different philosophical system of how we engage with the world and how the questions that you might want to ask with photography. So I find that really interesting. And actually, it's come up a few times for me recently talking about, the different art history that you have in China compared with Europe. So, traditional Chinese paintings would have different perspectives on the scene, all within one image. So, I've been looking at the idea that there's a particular perspective in both senses of the word in photography, but Chinese art history has like a different tradition. So yeah, that's interesting, I think.
And in a more broader view, but in your view, it's not, we are not like in a academic classes, because I think it's a really big topic. But how has photography changed over the past 10 years? It's a big question, but like really with your own point of view.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big question. I could go back even further
Yeah,
because I worked on
yeah.
BJP so long. Like when I first arrived, we had filing cabinets that had like transparencies and things in them. So obviously now that's a thing of the past. I mean, obviously digital technology has been a massive change. I was thinking about this recently, actually, because say when I first worked at BJP, the idea that there would be citizen journalists who had cameras in their phones and therefore could record stuff, you know, in a similar way to journalists, that was like a really interesting idea and a new thing. Whereas now, say, for example, with Gaza, what we've seen from Gaza has been so different because of social media, basically. So we don't just see what's in the newspapers anymore. Like people can be directly posting stuff online. So that's really interesting. And like, there's obviously negative things about social media. Like I have to delete Instagram because I find myself looking at complete rubbish for hours. But, I sometimes think that maybe we emphasize the negatives and we forget some of the good stuff as well. So, you know, obviously there's a problem with veracity and, you know, knowing that what someone says they're showing is true. And obviously that's a massive problem. But on the other hand, the accessibility of people to be able to post images from Gaza, that's huge, I think. And also, though, the accessibility of people being able to see stuff and get in touch. So I have photographers approach me on Instagram who otherwise, you know, they're not going to be able to go to Arles Festival and meet me, or they won't be able to go to London. They live somewhere else altogether and that's beyond them. So that's amazing, I think, that I and we can now connect. And even just on a personal level, when my son was young, you know, I wasn't going to loads of exhibition openings in the evening, but I could stay linked with photography and like the photography world because I could do a lot on my phone. So yeah, I think there's good stuff too. We shouldn't forget like the good stuff, while obviously it's important to think of the negatives.
So now you have Instagram, or you still, because you say you cut it and...
Oh, so yeah, sometimes I have the app on my phone, and sometimes when I feel like too much time has gone into Instagram, I have to just delete it off my phone. Yeah.
So what about the role of Instagram, you think, for photographers? You said for the connection, but to connect with professionals, but I think there are some other impacts.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good tool and resource for photographers. Like, say, for example, when I went freelance, I didn't build a website, which I should have done. But one of the reasons that I didn't really need to was because I could use Instagram as my portfolio. So that's a useful thing for photographers. I mean, I wouldn't say that you have to, but it's a resource that's there to use if you want to. I mean, obviously, when we're thinking about technology, there's also the questions about who owns it and who controls it, and, you know, all of those things too, which obviously is something to think about, definitely. Yeah. But yeah, I think it can be a useful resource for photographers. I have heard that sometimes getting an ad shoot is dependent on having a lot of followers as a photographer. Which I find a bit more strange. Like, the idea is that they bring an audience as well. That's, you know, a cool audience because photography is very cool. So that seems strange to me, that then the photographer is part of the marketing in that way as well.
Yeah, so maybe it's more like a communication. I think this can be important for the communication people who wants to have more impact, but because of the community of the artists or the photographers, so yeah, it can be a problem. Yeah, it can be confusing, at least for the people who...
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have some friends who are photographers who don't like Instagram at all. So they might not have an account, which obviously is fine, or they might, update it really, really rarely and use it more as a kind of website. But if I compare it to when I first started in photography, when people had to physically come to the office with a portfolio of prints, which is much more expensive to make, and then you have to physically be able to come and see me as well. So, yeah, I don't think it's all bad, definitely.
Yeah, I think what you said about the less, it's more easy to connect. It's and also thanks to that we can connect to people all around the world. So as we said before, we had to take the train. I don't know. It was not the same. The distance was really a big distance, and
yeah.
And you wear many hats. You are, as I say, editor, writer, educator. So all those as different roles inform one another. And how do you balance them in your daily work?
Yeah, it's a bit of a juggle, but I think most people who work in the arts have this kind of juggle. And also, I would say that when I first went back to work, when my son was young, it was much harder to juggle working on BJP with having a young child. And no one ever asked me about that juggle. So it's only because it's a more visible juggle having various jobs. But I see them as very interconnected, actually. They do inform each other. So say, for example, BJP isn't necessarily a place where, we would have a theoretical essay, but theory definitely informs in the thinking that goes on in the magazine and that is going on in photography more widely. So that's definitely useful to have. But I guess it's also useful as well that I bring some of the magazine sensibility into the university as well, for example. In the magazine, we actively try to support emerging photographers and people from underrepresented groups and parts of the world. So, yeah, I guess sometimes, it's not that I only put students from my university into the magazine, but definitely there's a place for the next generation of artists to be in the magazine.
Yeah, maybe you can see some trends or some topics with your students. And maybe also about the research, maybe with the students as an educator, maybe also you can do more research and bring them to Photoworks or to British Journal of Photography. So I think it's as you said, it's
it's really interesting. Yeah, like say for example, Salgado is a photographer we discuss in the university, like his approach to photography and the effect on the viewer of looking at the way that he photographed people who are in terrible circumstances. So he died recently, so we wrote an obituary in BJP. But we thought, we have this amazing resource on BJP that we actually speak to photographers. So we went back and looked over some of the old issues of BJP, and we found interviews with him from like 10 years ago and from 20 years ago. So we could do an obituary in his words. And also I realized that the kind of questions that we ask of his work now, they were being asked at the time, because the article that was, I think, from the 80s, even in BJP, it was talking about those same issues and same questions. I suppose that's a massive thing that I can bring to the students, though, is that I do meet with some of these really famous photographers and interview them. So it's not just this kind of distant world. I can sort of, give them some insights into what it's actually like to be a photographer and be working.
My last two questions are, what advice would you give to young writers or editors who want to work in photography and visual culture? And my second one is, what about young photographers? What should they keep in mind when engaging with institution or publication, like BJP or Photoworks?
Yeah. Well, first of all, for young writers and editors, I would say just really go for it. Like, take every opportunity that you can, and also make opportunities as well. You have to work hard because it's because it's a great job, basically. It's really, really interesting. So you get to speak with really interesting people, and then you get to digest those thoughts when you're writing, because for me, that's what writing does a lot. So obviously lots of people want to have that job. So you have to be really good. So for example, if you have a deadline, you have to meet that deadline. It's like really simple, but that's one of the things. I always say just get writing as well. Like, say, for example, I worked on a financial magazine, but then because I was editor of that magazine, I had transferable skills, which meant that I could then work in photography. So, it might not be your dream subject area straight away, but you will be learning stuff. It's a bit cheesy, but I think that everyone has like a superpower. So mine is reading. But someone else's might be something different. Like you might be someone who's really great at networking. You can go into any party and not feel intimidated and just chat with everyone. So, sort of think about what your strengths are really and make the most of them.
So you said your superpower is reading. So because you think you read a lot, so you can read people a lot. So yeah, could you just describe for you? Yeah, what is your?
I think you have to sort of feed your brain to be able to come up with stuff. Yeah.
So I think it's because you read a lot, so you digest.
Yeah.
And you have the mind to.
Yeah. I mean, I would say be a bit resourceful. Like, say, for example, when I was with my young son, it didn't mean I had to leave photography altogether because I had my phone. So there's always ways that you can be doing things. What else? Don't be afraid of technology. Like, technology is interesting, but I suppose, maybe photographers are more comfortable with technology than some writers, perhaps. But personally, I think technology is very interesting, and like we're living in an age where everything is changing extremely rapidly. So that's a really interesting time to be alive. Yeah.
No, yeah, I think I talk maybe about the photographers, but because you spoke about the thing you had a break because of your son. So maybe. Or it was at this time. It was to think it was difficult to came back to find a job. Or
well, I was on maternity leave and then I went back to BJP. So
okay.
I was very fortunate. Yeah. I mean, it would be harder, I think, to find a job with a young kid. Like, you can learn from things as well, though. Like, being with my son is very interesting because, because I'm interested in the idea that we're being indoctrinated in a Western way of seeing the world. But, when you have a baby, they aren't indoctrinated yet. So the way that they interact with the world is different to how you as an adult do. So that's something interesting, I think. And like, I've dragged him to lots of galleries and he's not necessarily always all that interested. But some of his criticisms I find interesting. So, but why do we just go to a gallery and stand and look at things? I'm kind of like, yeah, that's a good question. That's like the whole thing that I did, the Photoworks annual, the thing about was that question really. What is it we're doing when we have this distanced view? And say, for example, also he's into computers like many kids are now. And so he is interested in VR stuff. So if there's an exhibition with VR, we go. But that's also really interesting, I think. If you're interested in photography and images, VR is interesting. It sort of reminds me of, in early photography with the phantasmagoria, this idea that we would be in a simulated reality. It's a really old idea that has run alongside photography. So yeah, I'm more than happy to go to some of these crazy VR things that we do. But I think it's interesting as well for my work. So yeah, I think you can probably learn from any situation that you're in.
And for photographers, because I think you are in touch with a lot of photographers, so maybe you can have some advice or some things something is better to don't do, or because I think you receive a lot of portfolio. So so it's maybe if you have some some keys, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, first thing that I would say would be don't be afraid to send your work out there into the world, because, magazines like us, we rely on people wanting to show their work. So it's not that you are intruding. I think it's easy to feel that, certain institutions are really remote and that you don't have a place there, but you absolutely do. And like, as young people, I mean, you might not be a young emerging photographer, you might be 50, but, it's always interesting to get the perspectives of, a new generation or a different country. Or so if you feel that you don't fit, that might actually be a positive, because you might be bringing something new, actually. BJP has an email. We have a submissions email, which often we can't use the photography, but I'm very keen that we keep that email, because I like the idea that there is an open door, so anyone can send us their work. And we don't have time to answer all of the emails, but we do look at all of them. And that has led to an opportunity for people sometimes, somewhere or other in one of my fields. So yeah, absolutely, just send your work out there. And it's easy to do it. You just have to send an email and a few pictures. It's not that you have to print a portfolio and go to someone's office in London and get an appointment. So why not? And, if you never hear from them, it's a bit depressing, but like, you haven't lost that much either. So yeah, first of all, don't be afraid just to show your work. Secondly, I suppose it's maybe a good idea to have a bit of an idea about who you're sending your work to and like what they might be interested in. Like that goes for me as well. If I'm writing for The Guardian, it will be a different kind of a thing to what I would do for BJP or what I would do for someone else. So yeah, that could be valuable. What else? Look at images. Find something you are a bit obsessive about, because that will probably be quite interesting.
I think it's really important to know to whom who are like you are sending an email and not just send the same email to everybody, because it will be more difficult for you to understand and to see the link with BGP or with what you are interested. So I think it's interesting to do some research and to read some magazines before to know to do some research.
Yeah, I think it's, again, like, just, be resourceful. Like, I understand that you can't buy every photography magazine that's out there. This would be very expensive. But most of us have Instagrams or websites, so you can have a good look. It's also, it's worth actually reading some of what we do as well. Like, say, for example, if we're writing theoretical stuff about the power of the photographer, then there's certain projects that probably we're less likely to be interested in.
Okay.
So, yeah. And I suppose as well, I mean, I was quite surprised when I was freelancing, people would kind of hunt me down and they would realize who I was, like, behind the scenes, and seek me out and say, oh, I noticed you write for so-and-so magazine. Maybe you could suggest an article to that magazine. That's an impressive level of research that people were doing, I think. But that can also work. Yeah.
Okay, but I think we spoke about a lot of subjects. So thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your trip in Paris. Thank you, Diane.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. It was interesting.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Les Voix de la Photo. In the notes of this episode, you will find a sign-up link to receive Les Voix de la Photo newsletter. Sorry, it's in French, at least for now. Every 2 weeks, you will get a summary of the latest episode, exclusive content, my recommendation for reading, exhibitions, or conferences, and sometimes even gifts. Also, to help spread the word about the podcast, I'll invite you to leave a comment and 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you want to share your thoughts, suggest people you would like to hear, or learn more, you can follow me on social media, on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. See you soon!